Welcome to another episode. This week has been low-key. We've been trying to find a solution to Aries' hind foot issue. The work in the sand arenas have caused him to run down his hind feet pretty low. He isn't sore, but I'm trying to keep it that way. So I've kept the arena work a bit more low energy, so Aries doesn't degrade his feet further. We've been concentrating on quality of movement. As I warm him up, I don't care so much about what he does, as how he does it. Riding isn't easy on a horse's body. Neither is being kept in any kind of confinement. Horses are made to travel in straight lines, up to 20 miles a day. They develop all sorts of ailments from being ridden. That's why we need to teach them how to carry themselves. A horse naturally carries 60% of his total weight on his front legs. If you then add a rider to that, that's a lot of stress on those front limbs. So it's important to teach a horse to free up their shoulders and transfer some of that weight toward the rear. Someone had placed a kiddie pool in the arena. Aries was really not convinced it was safe, but he made a very valiant effort. It will take a while before he walks through it. Back to quality of movement. What I want to see is Aries lower his head and neck, raise his back, and step under with his hind end. When his head is up, his back is tense and his hindquarters are detached and strung out behind. Can you see in this still how his head is lower and his back is up, as opposed to here where his head is up and his back is tight? I have been trying to put a cinch on Aries every day. I'm not sure why he is still having a problem with the cinch. Part of it is no doubt due to my nervousness about cinching him. I was given a link to a fascinating article about an experiment called the umbrella experiment. I will put the link in the blog, but essentially they showed with heart monitors how a horse's heart rate will track exactly the same speed as their rider or ground handler's heart rate. They can sense our increased heart rate, and theirs changes to match. As most of you know, you can't hide your fear from your horse. I cinch Aries up slowly, one hole at a time. He is tense. You can see that by how high he is carrying his head, almost like he doesn't want to drop it down. That's the biggest reaction I got, which is pretty good considering what he did last week. After letting him move around with the cinch for a little while, I go and put the bridle on. Aries hasn't worked with a bit in a while, and it's good to keep that skill up. Now I let him move around with the bit on. Now this is fantastic carriage. He is lifting from the base of his neck and reaching forward, while also raising his back. He can't hold it for very long, but you have to start somewhere. Here I ask Aries to give to the bit. When he feels the pressure, I want him to give with his nose. I don't necessarily care whether he lowers his head. I want to change the angle of the pull. Here you'll get a good look at Aries' hind foot. It has grown out some, which is good. I apply Tough Stuff, which will help the foot harden a little and reduce the rasping effect of the sand, but it will only help a little. True foot health can only be achieved from the inside out. So Aries is getting some minerals to help with healthy foot growth, and I moved him off of grass and into a dry paddock, so his feet are not subjected to any dampness that will soften them. It's fly season! Yay! Today I sprayed Aries with fly spray for the first time. He was definitely suspicious, but did very well considering. It probably helped that I had Picasso standing right there, and I had just doused him, and he hadn't died yet. I had Picasso out today so that Aries could be around a calm horse when I cinched him. Sometimes just the calming effect of another horse is enough to take the edge off. It also helps that I am calmer about cinching as well. Over the weekend, I went to a symposium with physiologist Dr. Carrie Ridgway and master horseman Colonel Christian Card of the Cadre Noir in France. The symposium was on straightness and balance in the horse. I learned so much about horse anatomy and proper movement. In prior episodes, I've discussed how horses are handed just like we are. They prefer their right or left side. This leads to some very interesting effects on the body, if not compensated for, with riding for straightness. Depending on whether the horse was right or left leg dominant, Dr. Ridgway could predict where the horse would have sore muscles, and he was dead on every time with each horse. He uses acupuncture and chiropractics to fix these tense areas, and each horse had immediate releases. Armed with this new knowledge, as Aries goes around, I try and help him find the correct position. As discussed earlier, I want to see his hind legs step under and towards the middle, raising his back and lowering his head and neck. Though here Aries' head is up, He is not tensing his back as much. It looks more rounded, and he is stepping deeper. This means he has raised some of his weight off of his shoulders and shifted it back towards his hind end. As Aries tracks to the right, he keeps his neck rather straight. When he does bend, he comes in with the whole head and neck rather than having an arc to it. In an attempt to help him, I try to activate his inside hind leg to step under more. But Aries probably has a vertebrae in his neck that needs adjusting. One adjustment I learned this weekend was for the withers, a mostly overlooked area. The spinous processes on the back vertebra are incredibly long. It's important that they stay limber. I brought Aries over to stand next to Picasso while I cinched him. Every time he shifted back, I asked him to step forward. I then tried buckling the cinch from the right side to see if that would make any difference. He seemed a little more okay with the cinching process from the right side. I then let him move around a little bit, and he didn't have much of a reaction. I cinched him up one more hole, which, once he moved, did cause a little bit of anxiety. I was reminded at the symposium of the importance of a lunging cavesson. If you are trying to change the way your horse moves, there is no better tool. By placing the point of attachment on the front of the nose, any adjustment you make will not cause the horse to torque his head out of alignment with his body. Both a halter and a bit cause the horse to twist his head, counteracting straightness. As Aries goes around, I am gently applying pressure to the cavesson and alternately putting pressure on that inside hind leg. These actions need to be timed with where the horse's legs and weight are in space. As he continues, you should see him hold his head lower for longer, and he is holding a bend as well. Tracking right is Aries' more challenging direction, so I first tried to get that inside hind leg to step under and towards the middle. Here, Aries has a nice look to him. His back is raised, he is stepping under, and his head is low and forward. His head is also slightly facing in. This is a true bend. The joint between the head and neck has closed slightly on the inside, and ideally, the vertebrae of the neck are making a consistent arc. I removed and replaced the cinch one more time. The more often we do this, from both sides, the better off Aries will be. Aside from wanting to step back, Aries had little reaction to the cinch this time. After work is playtime. I let both boys loose in the arena to hopefully play. Pika is a very playful guy, but neither of them was feeling very frisky. And Aries didn't ever really let loose and run. He was still pretty tense at the canter. I hope that body work and learning to properly carry himself will help Aries discover a better way of moving. Afterwards, I caught Aries and did some stretching with him. Here I am doing a neck stretch. Stretching the right side of his neck, Aries is relaxed and has a smooth, even curve all the way down his cervical vertebra. When I do the same stretch to the left, you can see he is a bit stiffer and doesn't curve around evenly. This likely means he's got some tension on the left side of his neck. This would support the observation of his neck being stiff when tracking right. If the left side of his neck is stiff, it would be hard for him to bend to the right. Here's a still from earlier in the episode. Can you see the flat section? Another interesting adjustment I learned this weekend was a release for the hyoid bone. This bone sits between the horse's jaw bones near the throat latch. By drawing the tongue out of the horse's mouth, they move their jaw around and stretch out their tongue. This allows them to self-correct if the hyoid is out at all. By moving their jaw and tongue around, the horse can also release other tensions in his throat. Sometimes one side is out more than the other. Aries wasn't showing any particular discomfort around the hyoid, but I did the exercise anyway. Can't hurt. If a horse has tension there, when the tongue is released, after a minute or so, the horse will usually shake his head because their head actually feels different. Another neat fact I learned was that there is a bone that terminates near the base of the horse's tongue. This bone is attached via ligaments to the horse's shoulder. Gives a whole new understanding to how the bit and head carriage can affect movement.